Hey, it's Supa Dave from Progwarts. Thank you very much for joining me for another episode of Bleeding Edge Interviews. This week is very special. So when you talk about the founding fathers of progressive rock, you're probably going to think of bands like Yes, King Crimson, Pink Floyd, and Genesis. These are the pioneers who embodied the spirit of adventure and exploration that came to really define what progressive rock is, and everything we have now started with them. And when you think of the members of Genesis who have gone on to solo careers, some of them really hugely successful, who do you think has been the most prolific of those people? Did you know it's actually Steve Hackett, who has alone produced more solo albums than the rest of Genesis combined? Yeah, he is that prolific. It's the same man who inspired Eddie Van Halen to try finger tapping to add that to his techniques, and thus a legion of guitar heroes who came in his wake. No small potatoes is Steve Hackett. Well, Steve has a brand new album due out February 16th, entitled The Circus and the Nightwhale, and it's a grand concept album that fits the progressive mold in all the best ways. I had the lucky opportunity to sit down and talk with one of the godfathers of progressive rock, Steve Hackett, formerly of Genesis, but has done much more on his own. And it was quite the fun conversation. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Steve Hackett. Hello, Steve. How are you doing today?
Yeah, pretty good, yeah.
Great to talk to you. It's an honor and a privilege to be talking to someone of your influence in the world of progressive rock. So thank you very much for your time today.
Pleasure.
So getting into it, obviously you've got the album coming out, Circus and the Nightwhale. Your 30th album, and it's amazing that it's number 30 and over the span of 50 years. I got to wonder at times if you just look back and think, holy smokes, it's amazing how much I've done for all this time.
Yeah, it's kind of strange, isn't it? You know, when you think about all that. It's there we go, just adjusting. I don't know if I'm centered up or not, but hey, yeah, it's there's been a lot of albums, but I haven't been counting them. I've just been doing what came naturally, and this one, it seemed to write itself, really. It is autobiographical. I think it helps when you have a story that is explaining the dynamic of where you're going next. You've got the narrative to follow. So it's a bit like doing music for a movie, except that it's a movie for the ear rather than the eye. Although there are a couple of videos already, one of which seems to be attracting quite a lot of attention. I'm very pleased to say. So so far it's got something like 130,000 people who've seen that first thing, and the second one is something like 80,000 or something like that, which is very good, I think. With a progressive audience, everyone's saying, "Oh, that's a very small niche audience." Well, in many ways, it seems to be growing. Luckily for me, so I think I would never disparage any genre, particularly any genre that is basically pan-genre. You don't know what's going to happen from one track to the next, or even in the course of one song. Music that is full of surprise, that has drama instead of just dribbling on. Yeah, and that was what I was interested in many, many years ago. I used it as a calling card. Even before I joined Genesis, there was an idea of waging some kind of personal crusade against stagnant music forms. And so I've tried to live up to that, and it's got me into a lot of trouble over the years, but it's also opened a lot of doors as well. So anything that's groundbreaking, mold breaking, I think there's a price for that. I think you have to be unpopular to be popular. I think there's a certain amount of breaking through resistance swimming against the tide, all of these things. And I always feel as though I'm just starting out, which is a very strange thing for someone who's into their 70s to say, but that's how I see it, you know?
Yeah. That's an amazing thought, to feel like you're starting out. I guess that have that sense of freshness, despite the time that you've put into it, to continually feel fresh, I imagine, is very invigorating.
Well, it is, but I still get very excited about the two things that I can play with some degree of fluidity, which is guitar and harmonica. Those two things that I grew up with, and I don't always get the harmonica out, but whenever it does, I find it's usually able to do something very atmospheric or even spectacular, because it could be overdriven and can be as exciting as guitar if you want, if that's your intention. So I'm a big Paul Butterfield fan. So if I mentioned his name to English people, they don't know what you're talking about. But fortunately, Americans had some idea about, the power of that guy. And of course, to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame along with his band posthumously in several cases was quite something, because I was a huge fan for years. And I think it's just great that America has that, the facility, that idea of celebrating people. Sometimes it's just the writers of things that get celebrated. So that's awfully good, I think.
Yeah. So I do understand the album is a grand conceptual album, and as you just mentioned, it's got that autobiographical leaning. Talk about that a little bit. What are the parts of it that represent your life experience?
Well, the opening track, "People of the Smoke," is, I'm just looking at the track listing here as we're talking. Yeah. I was born in 1950 in London, and London was a very polluted, smoky, steam-driven affair. Homes were heated by coal-fired furnaces. So London was millions of chimneys all spewing it up into the atmosphere. It was also a very busy place. So we start off with a few samples of radio from 1950, a little bit of a newscast, one or two ads. There was a thing called a Pathé News that always started off with a cockerel in the middle crowing. And we go heteroplaning through that, which is radio being tuned in and out to give you the idea of that. And there's a video that has a kind of countdown, as old movies used to go, the numbers count down and all of that sort of old black and white world. So it's a very noir kind of track once more for me. And I like to think it's full of surprises. It's got some rocky moments. It's got some pre-rock and roll moments. It's also got some industrial moments. Essentially, I think it's heavy metal in spirit, but I think it's metal with a difference, with intention, not just the thrash, but to frame it in a different way. So right at the beginning we have radio, which then becomes something that was a British show called Listen with Mother, a radio show, and the dulcet tones of a very patronizing woman would say, "Are you sitting comfortably?" And then there'd be a long pause, and then I'll begin. That was the way children were being addressed. Of course, there's a baby's cry, so the baby is not feeling comfortable, and we extend the baby's cry, which then becomes a steam train that starts to speed up. And when that reaches full speed, it's the right speed for the orchestra, which is incoming. The string orchestra. We tried using various instruments on that, and originally I wrote that on guitar, but it sounded best with string orchestra, so we went with that. Then it gives over to rock band, so you get all these different sort of levels of almost like a multi-plane camera. I'm thinking of Disney here, but I'm thinking also that the way of framing a piece of music. I think ever since the Beatles kicked off Sgt. Pepper, here's a pop group or rock band with an orchestra tuning up instead, a sort of mock concert at the Royal Albert Hall. Seems as if it's the intention with Pepper's. And I've been racking my brains for years to think, how can I start an album in a different kind of way? And finally, I thought, I'll do it with this. We'll use actual radio. We'll use an actual newscast, but just little moments of it. And then we're away on the journey, which is the life journey and the description of what London was like and my impressions as a young child and playing on bomb sites. And it was my wife, Jo, who came up with the line, a hanging at dawn as a baby is born, or while a baby is born. And I thought, well, that's a bit strong, but actually that was how it was. So it was pretty strong stuff. In a sense, it's a protest song, but it's a protest song of the way the world was then. So it's the war that rock and roll waged upon the old world, the world of empire and acquiescence and doing as you were told, and all the dreadful things that the British Empire foisted upon poor, unfortunate other countries such as India, etc. Of course, the irony is that the Genesis guys, when they were raised and being brought up, the private school that they attended, they were being taught to be either a captain of industry or the next prime minister or the next viceroy of India. They were still very much empirical thinking, empire. This was, empire builders. Rock and roll was not really on the agenda. But I digress slightly. It moves on. The next track is These Passing Clouds, which speaks for itself. It's really almost like a kind of palate cleanser. It's the instrumental.
Right.
It's in the style of many instrumentals that I've done that got a slightly kind of French chord sequence to it, but it's melodic. I've deliberately kept it short so that we can recapitulate that theme on acoustic guitar later on, acoustic guitar and strings. Then we got Taking You Down. This is really about a character that I knew when I was a kid, 9 years old. One of my friends had a problem with his leg. All we were told was that he had a bruised hip bone, but I elected to be his minder, his looker after, and I pushed him around in a wheelchair. We shared lots of music, shared lots of things.
Wow.
But he was quite an extraordinary character. He already 9 years old. He was already teaching me to smoke, to play poker. To all intents and purposes, he was as unlike a child as anyone you could meet. Of 9 years old, he was already making the adult world jump to his tune. But he was also, I think, quite bitter in many ways. He did recover, but God knows what he's doing now. He's probably either in prison or running a small country somewhere, and that's taking you down. It was, one of those things where you get the feeling that apparently your best friend has turned on you because you're not cool enough, etc. That's school friends for you. Found and Lost. The next track is really about my first romantic adventure. My first girlfriend. It's kind of in a bluesy style. It's a little vignette, which acts as a kind of hors d'oeuvre for the track called Into the Ring. And this relates to things taking off for me musically,
Right.
aspirational stuff, and the aspect of musical chairs, joining Genesis. There are various references to this in symbolic terms, but then the track becomes more claustrophobic as it moves into other areas where you get the sense of a sort of grotesque fairground and things going wrong, and a kind of almost a kind of berserker that was going berserk out of control, and the more negative aspects of being controlled within a band by others. I wanted to work outside the group, and that basically wasn't going to be on offer. If I did that, then I was going to have to pay the price, which I did, and I left. And so we're into the next one, Into the Ring, which is quite a lot of these tracks are really about. I said Into the Ring was the positive side of turning professional. Get Me Up is another kind of dance of death. Really, that's a kind of a slow. It's a kind of dance of death. It's very bluesy, but it's very grotesque, and it's got some shredding on it. Ghost Moon and Living Love is really, it's a love song.
Yeah.
Which is about finding the lady that I'm married to and the difficulties we encountered as a married couple, because there were pressures, both personal and business, that were surrounding all of that.
Let me say, if I might as well, that track in particular was a standout for me listening through the album the first couple of times. The vocal harmonies on that were just beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous.
I'm glad you like that. And the lady who sings harmonies along with me on that, as she does on several of the other tracks, is Amanda Lehman. And she sounds really, really wonderful on that. In fact, it starts off with something musically. I was on the swamps in Louisiana on a trip to New Orleans at one point, and I was on the swamps when there was a storm, and I swallowed quite a lot of the water in the swamps, which great for the gators, not so great for me, and I was sick as an adult for about 2 weeks. And it wasn't until I hit New York and I had this wonderful dream. I had this beautiful music, a woman's voice singing as if from heaven. And I felt the clouds of pain literally part while I was still asleep, because I was still in pain when I was sleeping. And I just remembered this lovely piece of music, and Amanda sang that. So it starts in a spectacular way vocally, I think. And it was just a gift that was given to me. I'm glad you like that track very much, because it's very romantic, and I'm aware that progressive audiences seem to be able to take no end of war and carnage and difficult, impenetrable forms and difficult things to digest and tricky time signatures. But if you give a love song, that might be, considered way off limits. But nonetheless, one persists with, something that Jo said to me the other day. She said, you're covering full rant to full romance. Yeah. And I thought that's really where I'm coming from. I love gentle, loving, romantic music, and I love the other kind of thing where you're where guitars are screaming and tapping and doing all those angst-ridden things. Next track, Circo Inferno, which really refers again, to the tussle and the difficulties of establishing. Breakout really is the idea that, yes, I've got to cut ties and I need to be with this woman for good or ill. All at Sea, I think, describes pretty much the same. The idea of the Nightwhale, which comes next, was really the idea of being at one's lowest ebb and having to make a jump, a leap of faith, really.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be the first time that things have been swallowed by whales, whether it's Jonah or I'm just looking at the album sleeve here. This thing here, that's a small version of it because I don't have any.
Right.
But a circus being swallowed by a whale. Yeah.
It's great artwork. It's really striking.
Yeah, it's. I think it's a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to getting a full size. Although I love the sound of CD, in terms of artwork, to have vinyl full size, that'll be very interesting. So, the Nightwhale again is really things at their lowest ebb and are sort of having made that leap of faith and risking everything. You may get swallowed up and spat out, and that's it. Or, facing your deepest, darkest fears. But at the end of it, if you come out of it, you come out stronger. And that's the idea. So we go from that hellish thing into something which is rather more heavenly. And again, it becomes a love song. And the sense of that is continued through wherever you are, which, again, very much, it's a cross between a love song. So you've got that paradox, a love song and a rock song all in one. Luckily, fans that have heard it, because it's just been released as a single, the second single after People of the Smoke. Luckily, so far, people like it. We were very worried about this, but the proggers don't like love songs, but we hope to change their mind. Then White Dove really is right at the end, a nylon guitar piece, which is done in Andalusian style, in a sense of resolution, I like to think, and paring it right down to, well, this is me on my own guitar. This is what we do. We're not really relying on arrangements and orchestras and all the other things. It's the song of the guitar. So I'm very happy with that. I actually loved the album. I deliberately didn't play to myself for quite some time afterwards, because when you're working flat out on something, I don't know about you, but you get so close to it, you really can't hear it anymore. And then when I got a little bit of feedback from people, I thought, oh, they seem to like this. This is good. No one has heard the entire album yet. The most people have heard is, apart from professionals. But audiences, fans have had 2 tracks so far. So far, it's all thumbs up. And I think there's going to be a third one that's going to come out. We're a little bit undecided as to what that should be, but there's quite a lot of high energy stuff on the album. We don't want it to go to sleep for too long, if you know what I mean.
Gotcha. Yeah. From what I've heard, it's a really, really fine album. And it's, as you described, it's got surprises. It's got a lot of different varieties of music and styles. And hearing you describe that autobiographical angle of it, it represents your career in many ways as a whole, because you've done so many different things over the years. Clearly, you're not one to stand pat in just one area for very long in many ways.
No, I was thinking about that years ago, the idea of before Genesis, that music had become very stagnant. It seems that I was seeing a lot of bands that seemed to be running out of ideas, and I thought, hold on a minute, we've got to go right back to 1967 and 1966, where the Beatles were releasing Revolver back to back with Sgt. Pepper, and it seemed as if they were no longer doing romantic songs necessarily. That was part of it, love songs, but they'd moved on. And I wouldn't have been able to use the term at the time, but somebody described my music as pan-genre, and I thought, this is good.
Yeah.
If there's a single word, maybe it means that it's perhaps inclusive music, in that there might be nothing that I won't touch.
Right.
But I don't think I've done any country yet. But I don't know if there's such a thing as country prog. I guess maybe the nearest thing might have been Inside and Out by Genesis. The second half of it, a little bit of country style picking on it. But there's so much to do, and it always seems like starting out. So I guess, I do get very fired up by two types of guitar, one of which is electric, doing the pyrotechnics of that. The scream machine that is modern electric guitar playing, wonderfully exciting. But then to be seduced by the romantic sound of the nylon guitar being well played, that in itself is a kind of like a mini orchestra. If you get it right, you can get so many tones out of that and make it sound so big if it's treated properly. Not every piece is going to do that, but with judicious use of reverbs and different tones. There's a famous piece by Enrique Granados called La Marca de Goya, Tonadilla, La Marca de Goya, after the painting of Goya. It's a naked woman. It was a scandal at the time of the painting, but the piece of music is absolutely stellar. I think it was Yobet who came up with the arrangement originally for guitar, and Segovia recorded it, and it's beyond spectacular. It's as if the notes go in all sorts of directions, and you can't believe that you're just listening to one instrument.
That's amazing.
So I ended up recording that on an album called Tribute many years ago, but I think that's the one piece that I think, if anything, shows the colours of what the guitar can do. That's the one. It's so beautiful. You get this deliberate sense of disconnect with it, where it's not a one-horse trick. It's a kind of waltz. It's almost a lullaby. It's very lovely. But then, I guess my passion for nylon is well known. I started using it with Genesis nylon guitar on a couple of things, and I thought, no one's using nylon in rock and roll. I'll do this, and then I noticed that other people were taking up the challenge. Later on, Madonna, Sting, use of nylon, and to popularize it outside of either a classical or a flamenco context, I thought, job done. We could do more of this in the future, to change people's minds about that's not really a rock instrument, is it? No, but it leaves space for other things. Leaves space for the voice, that's for sure.
Yeah. And that's, to us as fans, our benefit that you have had such passion for really all aspects of the guitar, because, we're blessed with being able to witness your skill and talent with all of it. I've seen you live, and it's impressive every single time. So, thank goodness you did that. Thank goodness you inspired other people to do the same.
Well, I'm glad you've enjoyed that. It's been an amazing journey for me. the journey with it within music. It's always been my constant companion and rescuer.
Right.
It's been an extraordinary thing, and so I feel very blessed to have had that. My father was very capable musically, and he passed that on to me. He was a very gifted, sweet man, and one of the things he passed on, probably about the only thing that I was able to do, other than the other 20 things that he could do to a professional standard.
Wow.
Such as soccer and cricket and many other things.
Wow.
He was very, very gifted.
Amazing.
The one thing I picked up on was harmonica from him, and then he was the one who gave me my first guitar. He brought one back from Canada. I was eventually able to just about get my arms around it when I was 12, and I didn't really look back after that. It was an important, very, very important gift.
Yeah. Sounds like, wow, it's amazing. Now, I want to be mindful of our time because I know I don't have a lot of time to talk to you. I'd be happy to. But I know you've also got a tour coming up next year, or not next year. Now it's this year. I'm forgetting it's 2024 already. There's where my mind is.
That's right.
Tell us about that a little bit. As I understand, you've been doing your series of basically celebrations, so to speak, of 50th year milestones for Genesis albums. And here we're talking about The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway.
Yep. Well, The Lamb Lies Down one is going to be later. We're first of all, because I'm on COVID catch up, I'm still doing Foxtrot so for the areas that I'm going back to, we're fulfilling that commitment. Sometimes these things have ended up being 3 years delayed because of COVID. But The Lamb will follow later on. That's the thing. So I'm still doing Foxtrot, which, to my mind, Foxtrot plus solo stuff. Some things from the new album, some older solo things as well. For me, Foxtrot and all the Genesis Revisited stuff, there seems to be a golden period with early Genesis, the years 72 to 73, where we did Foxtrot, followed by Selling England by the Pound. And that's from a time when John Lennon started doing interviews and giving us name checks. And one of the lovely things he said was that he considered Genesis to be true sons of the Beatles. Wow. And so I would say, I don't think praise could come from any higher quarter as far as I'm concerned. Although I have to say, I had something lovely the other day. It was something that Jimmy Webb signed for me because I said some lovely things. I'd said some nice things about Jimmy Webb. I was a huge fan of Jimmy Webb's work, and so were the rest of Genesis. And he sent me something, so I've got his signature on something. And I've never met him, but I think we had, the four great writers. It seems to me we had Lennon, McCartney, Dylan, and we had Jimmy Webb. And somehow, what those guys didn't do is almost not worth talking about. So that was it. To aspire to be able to play occasionally pieces of Bach, and occasionally to be able to write material that was up to that standard. That's what we aspired to do. Of course, you have your mentors, you have songs that just jump out at you where they become part of your life, and you think nobody writes bittersweet stuff and lost love like Jimmy Webb. That's it, it's and the template for much progressive stuff that followed after the stunning 7 or 8 minute single that was MacArthur Park. When that first came out, I think those lessons weren't lost, or that opportunity wasn't lost on Genesis. So the Genesis epics, I think, stem from that of course, I was the one who came up with the idea that we should do a really long form song. So that became Supper's Ready. I thought we could do that and do it. If we had all the bells and whistles, we could do it live. If we had the lights, we had the sound effects, we had this, that, and the other, that then we could do something that would engage the audience. But you do need everything going for it. I think you need some aspect of a visual thread to be able to take people forward with the narrative, and that's been a constant challenge for me, especially with new stuff. When I tried to make this album, a great long piece of music running consecutively, thereby disqualifying myself from any airplay by DJs because they hate they hate segues. Hey, I really hate that, Steve. When bands do that, why do you do that kind of stuff? Well, it's because some of us like long form, and we figured that we are going to get radio play anyway. It doesn't fit into a radio format. I don't want to fit into a nice, easy niche here. So I'm up for long form if the material warrants it. Yeah, why not?
And clearly there has been, and as you noted, it seems like it's growing recently. There's an audience for that. There's an audience for seeing artists who are not going to keep themselves restrained to a certain genre or a certain style or a certain approach to how they write their songs.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you continue to carry that torch is one of those things that's wonderful for the young folks coming up that are looking for examples.
I think people get tired of formula, and they can spot it, whether it's the breakfast bass drum that is annoying you in your hotel, or something else. It's very rare that I'll hear a piece of music when I'm out and I think, wow, that's really good. Who the hell's that? But every now and again, there's something that breaks the mold, and you think, yeah, this is doing for me what film music does for you on screen. It's the other voice, the other script, the subtext. It's coming through. You can have a frame, and yet, of course, how you respond to that all depends on the music. Is it going to be spooky? Is it going to be jaunty? Is it going to where's it going to take you? So I'll borrow from all these, all the movie stuff, from horror stuff, from just about downright everything. Nothing should be off limits. So I think the word pan-genre, which is a bit of a mouthful, inclusive music. If only there was something that was better than the word prog. Prog has no poetry to it, unfortunately, but jazz has more poetry than the term prog. But it's a bit like jazz with balls, isn't it? Somehow, a jazz with surprise.
Good description. And I have to wonder, when you are in the mode of playing the old music, so to speak, your stuff from 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, over the years, I certainly have to imagine that you have continued to broaden and refine and expand your own musical and technical palette. How much of temptation is it at times to start to tinker with arrangements for that music?
Well, I don't know. Do you mean new music or old stuff?
Well, meaning when you are playing the old Genesis live, and you look at it through the lens of how you make and play music now.
Yeah,
I got to wonder at times if you go back and you go, I could have done that slightly better here. I'm going to change this up. Or if you are leave it as it was, mostly out of consideration for the fans who expect to hear it note for note.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I've got moments of Genesis guitar work where I think the line was okay, but the sustain died on me, and so now playing Fernandez guitar. It's got feedback on board, so if you want, you can eliminate percussion and decay and just have the note in the middle. Tracks such as Chamber of 32 Doors, on the re-record of that, on the second Genesis Revisited album, I kicked it off with nylon, which wasn't on the original, and we had an orchestra's worth of strings. And then there was a happy accident one day where we were playing back the strings, but it was also playing back the strings in reverse, and it made it sound like it was much more symphonic. So there's a symphonic section's worth of strings that come in, playing the same lines that keyboard was playing. Back in the day, it was mellotron strings and RMI piano through a phaser, which was lovely in its own way and of its time, but essentially I think the harmonies were classical, and I thought it deserved full orchestra. So the first Revisited album I did had genuine orchestra, Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, sometimes mellotron and orchestra playing together. We have all of that, the kitchen sink, in other words, everything. On this one, Chamber of 32 Doors kicks it off, and I got to do the guitar work so that it would sustain as much as the vocal. It was much more under control, and I played the same lines pretty much, but then I did accompaniment to the verses. Some of those moments where everything's very, very stark, and I took out everything, but I had a few harmony guitars way off in the distance, going through fuzzbox or model equivalent of that, a line 6 thing, and I just wanted to sound eerie. There's these guitars hanging there, like a sort of distant threat. I guess, I'm thinking of the influence of Peter Gabriel, who was largely responsible for that track, and some of the things that he did later on. By the time he was doing his third album, he was sometimes having things that were very distorted, but very far off and way off in effect. So I was bringing, if you like, old Genesis and new Genesis together, old thinking and new thinking, old song, new clothes, new little bit of new arrangement on it. Other things were absolutely classic, and I wanted to keep that. The piano, the slightly country feel of the chorus on that song. Right. But yeah, when you go back, sometimes it can be very difficult to change guitar solos that were deliberately written.
Sure.
I remember my brothers and I having conversations about this, about a solo will be better if you write it. Up to then, I'd been a blues man, and I thought, well, you just do a different solo every time. But this was, okay, I can give it a melody. And then when you come to do a re-record decades later, you think, actually, I can't afford not to do this melody. Perhaps I can extend the song.
Right.
Perhaps I can take it to the mountains at the end, like at the end of Supper's Ready, and have the recognizable phrases, the song, but then, as I say, take it off somewhere else, to the mountains, and let it fly that way. So yeah, there can be changes. I think that particularly the music of Genesis from this era that I was talking about often benefits from having a sympathetic, symphonic take on it.
Right.
Keyboards that aspired to be orchestras can now be orchestras.
Yeah.
So many things can be done. We had a limited amount of tracks in the old days. Now,
yes.
Roger King will sometimes turn to me and say, I think we've got 300 tracks on this track. And I say to him, well, whose fault's that? Yours or mine? And he says, well, what you used to do when you used to have a couple of beats on a tambourine, that would share a track at some point, and you'd punch that in back in analog days. But now, of course, pretty much every track has got an orchestra's worth of things going on. Not an orchestra that you might recognize every time, but lots of detail, lots of layers. And I love what that does. But there are times on this new album I've pared it back. I pretty much Ghost Murder Living Love. We start to take things out actually at the end and just have. You'd be surprised, but it's just one guitar and a bit of auto harp, as well as the vocal harmonies, because less is more, it seems. If you want to give something vocal priority and intimacy, the more you add, perhaps the more you're subtracting in a way from that central focus.
Yeah. What they call it, addition through subtraction sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love hearing the scope of the cinematic approach you have to music. I am a musician wannabe in heart. Oh. Never quite found the dedication and time to actually become what one would consider to be proficient at a instrument, but have always been very fascinated and interested in those who do. So I always enjoy hearing about the process.
Thank you very much.
Watching people work.
My device is saying that there's 10% battery remaining. Unfortunately, the device was used for other things.
Gotcha.
And we plugged it in literally half an hour before this to give it. But I do apologize if it's suddenly I'm in the middle of something and
no worries.
And the answer to the meaning of the universe is.
Well, I really, again, thank you very, very much for your time today. It's been an absolute delight talking with you.
Yes.
Certainly one of, as I call you, one of the godfathers of Prague. So it's been a great thing. I wish you the best with the album. I wish you the best with the tour. Seems to me you enjoy traveling, so I hope the touring is fun for you.
Always, yeah. Traveling is fun. It's kind of what drives us, living out of a suitcase. That can be tricky at times, but audiences give so much back. So it's a pleasure to do it, believe me.
Wonderful. And it's a pleasure for us to be able to see you do it. So
great.
On behalf of the fans, thank you very much, sir. Take care and have a wonderful day.
Absolutely wonderful. Lovely talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best. Ciao.
Just what a thrill it was for me to have that conversation with one of the people who created the basis, the foundation for all the progressive rock and metal and exploratory and experimental music we hear these days, and inspired a legion of guitar players in his wake. Steve Hackett, what a wonderful conversation. Just listening to him talk the way musicians talk about the ideas and the expansive ways that they try to get their music across and everything. Just an absolute thrill, and easily could have let that go on for a couple of hours and I would have been happy as a clam. But I just want to take a moment and express my sincere gratitude, Mr. Steve Hackett, for taking the time to talk to me, for giving me the opportunity to pick your brain just a little bit and spend a little time with one of the founding fathers of progressive rock. It was indeed my pleasure. I wish you the best with the album. I hope the tour is hugely successful. I look forward to seeing you when you come around this way again, because I know you'll be around in one of your favorite venues. It's 4 miles down the road from me. Very cool. So I look forward to that, and I hope it's all wonderful for you and you enjoy the travels along the way. Meanwhile, if you are guys out there watching, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoy what I'm doing, hit the like, hit the subscribe, follow along, hit the bell if you want to be notified. That would all be wonderful. You can check out my social media links in the description below, as well as the link to my Live 365 channel, which is all progressive rock all the time, featuring Brain Salad Sundays, where it's nothing but 60s and 70s era progressive rock, all back to the roots every Sunday. And meanwhile, if you enjoy listening. You can dig out my back catalog of interviews. Just check out Bleeding Edge Interviews wherever you get podcasts. That's all I have for you now. Remember, don't be afraid to deviate from the norm. Keep it proggy. This is Supa Dave, signing off.